All right, everyone, welcome to Combat Radio. You're going to thank us. In fact, just thank us right now. We've got a fantastic conversation planned. Well, as far as we plan things, this has been planned. Of course, we don't plan things any more than maybe a text message or exchange or a phone call. We go, hey, you know what? Remember this? Yeah, we should talk about that.
Yeah.
And that happened this week by the maestro, legendary former Warner Brothers VP Bill Daley, who we were just shocked to discover we've known each other for now almost 25 years. Terrifying for him, funny for me. And today's conversation is going to center around a Warner Brothers classic. Now, which classic, you may ask? Something from the Kubrick archives? Something from John Ford? What
Something
classic?
from the DC universe, actually.
Yes. Yeah. No, my friends, we've gone on a deep dive to bring you something quite special. The movie you all know and love, or you all know. Um, and maybe you'll love it after this. Jonah Hex. We talk about Jonah Hex,
Thing,
2010.
nothing will make me love it.
Oh,
Okay.
we go back a ways, and here's the thing. As always with these movies, it's not about making fun of production mishaps as much as it is trying to understand the mishap itself and what happened. And this is one of those classic cases. I mean, I remember when this was production, even my wife was coming back to the house saying, "You're not going to believe what's going on with
Yeah.
Josh Brolin at the studio." But more on that in a minute. It's Combat Radio, and we'll be right back to kick off all things Jonah Hex. You're welcome.
NMOSB is a disease that can blind you, paralyze you, or kill you. But the good news is doctors seem to think they're very close to a cure. They also seem to think that a cure for NMOSD will be a cure for cancer. So that's a two for one that I can't ignore. And if you're like me, you would donate today to the Guthy Jackson Foundation. My name is Steve Surgic, and I approve this message.
Well, we've been doing combat radio. Sonny Landham, Billy the Indian from Predator, and I first stepped into a radio studio back in early 2009. Bill Daly's been one of our favorite guests for however long that is now.
Since about
For
2012,
show.
I'd say. I think that's
Yeah.
when I became aware of it.
Yeah. And you've told some of the best stories, but I will say something about Bill Daly. He doesn't like to tell the same story twice. If I ask him for a moment in his production history that's comical or fun, he'll sometimes say, I've already told that story, which is interesting because he's the only guest also that assumes that our listeners, such as they are, hear everything he said. But we brought him back. We've
They
actually,
don't? Oh, you mean they don't?
I don't know if they've got sort of that biblical level of attention to it, but
Uh,
maybe they do. Maybe they do. I mean, actually, I get surprised by what people ask me, and sometimes from over a decade ago, as if I'm going to remember. But whatever. I'm here for the people. All right. So let's just take it from one step at a time.
right.
Today's conversation.
Well, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is mostly going to be new because I've been reluctant to talk about Jonah Hex in any kind of detail. In broad terms, what a disappointment it was, and but yeah, I do. There's an article. Everybody should know. There's an article that I forwarded to you that came from someone else about Josh Brolin and his feelings about Jonah Hex. And the title of it, the headline was that Josh Brolin will never stop shitting on Jonah Hex. Okay. And which is great because neither will I.
Okay,
So
so let's go to Exhibit A in the Jonah Hex evidence vault. The movie itself, before we get to people's opinions on the creative side, how did this come about at Warner Brothers? Because
this
I think I was based with Frank Darabont. I was next to Frank Darabont at the Warner Hollywood lot at this time. This is like 2008, 9 when this started getting momentum, right? It came out in
2009 for
10.
sure. 2009 for sure. We finished it in 2010. It
Hmm.
probably came out very late 2010 or early 2011. Um,
Right.
it when it first hit our production status report, Neville Dean and Taylor were attached to it. And if you look at the credits, they're still
Are
credited as
those
the writers of it. I'm looking
are those the
now.
crank? Were those the
Now,
crank? Who are the
yes, they were the
Yeah,
crank
okay.
guys, Mark Neville Dean and Brian Taylor. And I had just, I mean, it's a long story. I'm not going to go through the whole story, but I
Mm,
had seen Crank. It was recommended to me I was looking for something that would really highlight the Blu-ray capability of the PlayStation 3. I think it was PlayStation 3 that had the
Right.
Blu-ray built in. And the guy at Fry's, Fry's, the guy at Fry's said, pulled Crank off the rack and said, go with this one. And he gave me another one too, a soccer film um, from England with
Goal?
Stephen Delane.
Was
Goal,
it goal?
yeah.
Goal.
So he recommended both of those, and then I picked up a couple of Black Hawk Down was recommended. So I picked up the ones that were recommended because I wanted this thing to really I wanted to showcase the Blu-ray so I could get a good thing for it. And then after I'd done that, I contacted one of the executives at Warner Home Video and I asked him to send me some Blu-rays. And he was kind of like, and I said, no, not to give to me. I just got this thing. I just want to borrow them. I'll send them back to you. I don't need to keep them. It was like, okay. So he sent me The Fugitive. That was a terrible transfer. They've redone it since then. I highly recommend the new one. But anyway, Crank was one of them. And that was Neville Dean and Taylor. And then I saw their names were attached to Jonah Hex. And I'm like, I want to meet these guys.
Yeah, promising.
Yeah,
Promising.
positively. I did want to meet these guys. And then they were in production with Crank 2 here in LA. And the production exec on Jonah Hex was Ravi Mehta, who then went on to become the head of Fox. He's the head of production.
Right. Right. I
So
remember Robbie.
Ravi and I went to the set. They were doing a location set at the power plant in Glendale, California, and it's right on the border with Burbank. And that's what they do. All the cities put their power plants right on the border with the next city. I guess in case there's a mishap, I don't know. But
That real quick, that
so
sounds like my cousin's PT boat story from Nam, where the Army built the base and the Navy had us, and they put the ammo depot right on the perimeter with the Navy PT boat line. So if it got hit by a mortar round, it would blow them off the map. And that's just what I thought about. I bet you that is why they put it next to Glendale in case
well, my guess
up the
is
smoke.
that
But anyway,
and then Glendale's power plant was on the border with LA.
mhm.
And I know Pasadena's is on the border with South Pasadena. And if South Pasadena was smart, they'd put theirs on the border, the same border, but they didn't. So that's usually on the border. It's probably property that's not really prime property, so they put it where they can and
Yeah,
without
maybe.
rushing property values.
So they're
So
shooting at this place, right?
they're
So
shooting at the Glendale power plant. And Ravi and I went over there and so we got to meet Neville Dean and Taylor. Um, Jason Statham was there. He was doing a stunt where he was jumping over the fence and he was going in among all the power plant equipment. And they didn't shut this place down. It was still running. And I was like, is it? And
I
there's
love it.
hazardous signs
I
all
love it.
over the
Yeah.
place. And
Crew's got hard hats, probably waiting to
Jason
find out.
Statham had, boy, he was game. He was really game. He was no problem, mate. And he'd jump over the fences, and all this stuff. It was really cool. And I made sure that when Crank 2 became available on Blu-ray that I got it. I have it, and
Right.
stuff.
So
But the two of those guys were amazing to watch because they have this visual style about them, a lot of moving cameras and stuff.
mhm.
And they intended to do this digitally. We up until 2011, with the exception of two movies, everything we had done was shot on film. We did do we used the Genesis camera for Get Smart, and then there was the Genesis camera used for another project. And then as right before I left Warner Brothers, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, or it's titled something like that. And that was on the Alexa camera. So
Well, no, that was way before. It wouldn't have been that because that was way before you departed Warner Brothers.
no.
Uh,
Well, the movie was coming out as I was departing
I
Warner
don't think
Brothers.
that. Well, however it goes down with your resume, we'll debate that
So
later.
so
So there
anyway,
you are.
but it was amazing to watch these guys because they would do tracking shots. They'd be on rollerblades.
Mhm.
I'm not kidding, and they would attach the cameras.
Yes.
They had these little digital cameras, 4K or whatever, I mean, really high resolution video cameras, and they would attach them to broom handles, and they're on inline skates, and they're like hockey players moving around, but with the camera there, and it was absolutely amazing to watch that. So I was curious to see what they would do with Jonah Hex. I picked up part of the material that we got from DC in advance of this was one of the comic books, and I don't remember Jonah Hex as a DC character at all when I was a kid, but I'm way older than most of the people watching this. So I gave up on DC Comics when I was 14, and they had stopped doing Jerry Lewis comics. Okay. Jerry Lewis was a DC comic hero. Okay. And so
So
was
what you're
Bob Hope.
saying, yeah, so you're going back to like the Jurassic period
I'm going
of
back to
comic booking.
1967, I
You want
think.
to know what's funny about this is I was just thinking about this morning after a meeting with my editor. Actually, we talked about this project that we were going to talk Jonah Hex, and it got me thinking that it was a comic. And I realized that growing up surfing in Laguna Beach, I had not seen a comic book, a physical comic book in my life until I was about 9 years old. Can you believe that?
Oh,
8 or 9.
yeah.
Yeah, I just never had, and I can even remember the first one I saw. It was a Star Wars one, which is probably a collector's item now. Anyway, so this was a comic, right?
Yeah.
So the
But I don't
comic,
remember Jonah Hex being a comic, and specific. I don't remember being a comic at all, and I certainly don't remember DC. And I was very limited in what I liked on DC. I didn't care for Batman. Batman was too dark, too violent, and they printed it with this blue ink that actually hurt my eyes to look at it. Believe it or not, the blue ink, certain
okay,
shades of the blue that they were using actually hurt my eyes to look at it. I was
gotcha.
definitely a Superman guy. Bob Hope comics, Jerry Lewis comics. Um, that's pretty much it. I
When you
never,
talk Jerry Lewis and Bob Hope comics, were they like the misadventures of Bob Hope? Was it like Ghost Breakers with Bob Hope, or was it Bob
I,
Hope doing Bob Hopian things? What was it?
it was, they were
Was it
other
like a Scooby
writers.
Doo with Bob Hope? Or
No, there were other right. There was a Bob Hope Adventures of Bob Hope. I don't know what it was called. You can see them on eBay. And
yeah,
if I
we'll
didn't know
see what
we'd
this
talk
is.
about this. I didn't know that we would talk about this, but I know we're going to do another break. And while we're at break, I will go get one or two Jerry Lewis comics to show because I have them, and not all of them. I have a few, but they even had Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis comics. Believe it or not, I never knew that
No, I didn't know
until
that either.
I got to know Jerry Lewis, and I'd go to his home in Bel Air, and he had like an office slash library, and he had leather bound copies, like sorted by year or every 2 years, in his library. And I pulled one. It said Martin and Lewis Comics, I think, and it had
All right,
years. And I
so
was like, oh, what is
le-
this? And I pulled it down, and there Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis comic books. I swear to God. So I actually have one from the month that I was born,
okay,
August of 1953. I have that edition. I think it's July, August, or
you
maybe
know,
September.
leave it to Jerry Lewis to tell you about the Jerry Lewis comic book and have it ready to
He,
go.
no, he didn't. He didn't tell me about it. I stumbled upon it in his little library. It
All
was
right,
big. I mean, it was a big room it looked like a library with a desk in it,
yeah,
But I will bring when we go to a break, I'll come back with that one issue at
bring
least. And
it.
I know I have one or two others.
So real quick, circling back though, this is I think Jonah Hex is a later comic though, right? 70s, 80s, somewhere in there. So
It's
we're
got
gonna
to
get
be
ripped
because they
apart
gave
by
me one. They gave me
yeah.
one to look at, and because when you read comic books, it's like looking at storyboards. I mean,
Mhm.
really. And the comic came complete with the hole in his cheek, but it wasn't. I don't remember what's in the movie. There was a hole in his cheek, and I think there was like a piece of flesh that would come across. If I'm not mistaken. And I just thought that was like really weird as anatomically, like how do you avoid an infection and what you can see his teeth through it. So I thought that was weird. I just thought the whole thing was odd, and I wondered what it was the studio planned to do with it. But knowing that Neville, Dean, and Taylor were involved, I was buying into it, totally and completely buying into it, because I thought at least the cool factor would be really high. That was an expression we had at Warner Brothers when we had sort of offbeat movies like The Matrix, really high cool factor,
So
right?
I'm going to walk the plank on this and say I actually think, from what I've seen from the comic and the concept art in preparation for this, and it's not as extensive as people would like. Like, our planning is limited here, people, because we have this thing called a life. But it looks like that a concept that would work to me. It looks like it would be a fun movie. It looks like there's some adventurous elements you can employ. It's got the Western theme, which is that works for a lot of people right out of the gate. And I have no problem looking at the same dude. I'd go for this. This sounds pretty fun. And Josh Brolin, I don't have too many firsthand stories with Josh, but I think that's a good choice. As
I thought so too.
I think that's not a
Yeah.
bad decision. And I personally love what they did to his face, and I love that they have sort of an uncanny, unattractive scar, because usually, the actors will dictate something that's very never mind.
Right.
Anyway, so
Well,
continue. So
but
who
that's part of the comic. The comic was that this guy had a
right.
war
Uh,
wound or something where his face, where he was disfigured in his
Now, who
face. I
was the
don't remember the
production
whole thing.
exec on this? Was it Ravi or who?
Ravi, yeah, Ravi
Ravi
made
was.
it.
Okay.
He was the production exec. Creative exec was Greg Silverman. So
Ravi was
Greg
super
was,
smart.
yeah, Ravi is. He's not
Yeah.
was. He's,
Well, I
he
mean,
is.
I'm speaking from the past of when I was at Warner Brothers.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I'm sure Ravi's still smart and probably a bit
I
of a smart
haven't.
ass.
Oh God,
But
I haven't talked to him in years. Not
but
because I don't want to, but I just don't
well,
see
he's
him.
going to want to talk to you after this.
Maybe,
Um,
maybe not.
by the way, did you get your silk pajamas for Christmas from Joel Silver? I got my set for after we talked him up. I got my box. Maybe Ravi will send us something. Don't
I
hold
went
back,
to
Ravi. We
lunch.
have a lot of love for you. I'm sure Deep Roy too, after we talked about Tim Burton, is going to send us some Wonka pajamas. That's going to be the trend here. People are going to
Did you
send
see
us
my
pajamas.
reply? Because Deep Roy um, did a reply on your post,
Yeah.
and
I
I couldn't tell exactly. It sounded like he might have been a little bit offended at what we were saying, but then I replied to him and I told him, and I didn't realize that it would pin his name when I hit reply, and then
yeah.
when after I saw it was posted, and I didn't want to take it down. Once I posted it, I didn't want to take it down, but I see it was like it was as if it was addressed to Deep Roy, and then I'm talking about Deep Roy in the third person, and I told him that
Hmm.
for me, Deep Roy was one of the best parts of that movie. I just found it delightful, the whole idea. Even when Tim first said that, the Oompa Loompas are going to be one person,
Hmm.
yeah, and it was going to be Deep Roy. And until I saw the dailies, I had no idea who Deep Roy was, but I just thought it was great. And then as I was watching the thing on YouTube that you posted, and then you inserted a scene there, with the song, and you see all the deep voice everywhere. And I still think that that's like fabulous. And I appreciate the fact that you introduced me to Deep Roy, because I didn't know if we shot the movie in England. I didn't know if he was English or what, and I never knew if I'd ever have a chance to meet him.
Let me
But I was very pleased that I did.
let me do a post conversational investment for the audience here for 10 seconds. So Deep Roy is a genius, I think. I think he's super talented. And you don't have to dig too far on our archives to realize we have a lot of love for Tim Burton around here. But the way I posted the thing was on Facebook was like, forget about Tim Burton. Let's talk about Deep Roy. And we do have that sort of sarcastic sense of humor, like, forget Kubrick. Let's talk about the guy that built the space helmet,
Right.
where we'll focus on something. And in this particular case, we were talking about Deep Roy's work. So I think what it was Deep Roy obviously indebted to Burton and knows where his paycheck is. Like, bounced in there and said, "Hey, I love Tim Burton, blah blah blah," and we're like, the thing about text is you can't get into the conversation. You have to pick, strategically how you converse these things out. I'm not going to get into it with Deep on Facebook, but I'm like, dude, we love him too. That's not what we're saying. We're just having fun
Oh
here.
yeah.
And
I would work anytime. There are some directors that I don't want to work with, and I would assign that task to one of my staff because I don't want to.
Who we talking about when you say that? And
I'm not going to tell you.
Tim Burton is not one of those guys. We would both
Tim
work
Burton
with
is not one of those
Yeah,
guys.
no
I love
question,
working
no
with Tim
question.
Burton. And the thing is that Tim Burton tends to surround himself with really, really good people. So you
Yeah, for
love
sure.
working with his editor, and you love working with his producers, and
Mm.
you love working with his DP and all the people he brings along.
And Deep fits into that camp.
Yeah.
So I'm going to post this highlight just so Deep can bash us publicly about it. I'm kidding. Of course, he's got a lot of class. But anyway, so that's where that came up. But what we were talking about is, and now it occurs to me, I know who some of those directors are that you assign, that you pawn off on your underlings, but I'll do you the favor and skip over it. So these guys are doing Jonah Hex. Ravi's the exec. Here's the funny thing. Maybe I imagined it, but as you know, I was based in Building 81 at Warner Brothers. So is Akiva Goldsman. And I think he has a credit. His company's got a credit on this.
Oh, Akiva was one of the producers. I mean, he did the
Okay.
script, or he did
Weed Road. I saw a Weed Road credit.
Yeah, it was Neville Dean and Taylor with the original script, and then Akiva, I'm sure, had a hand in all that. But he was a producer, and he was deeply involved. I I don't know what was going on in production. I don't know if he was deeply involved. I don't know if he was in New Mexico the whole time of the shoot, supervising everything. But I know that once it got to post-production, and especially once the movie got into trouble, that it wasn't really working.
He's on
Akiva
the scene,
worked,
no doubt. Yeah.
he worked night and day to do what he could. And then they even had Andrew Lazar, because he was one of the producers as well. He has a different company deal with Warner Brothers. Andrew Lazar was working day and night. And at the end of the day, it had to be finished. It was basically abandoned. But there's a quote, and I heard it from Danny DeVito, but I don't know if he's the originator of the quote. But the quote is that, great art is never really finished. It's abandoned.
Yeah, I've heard it from him too, and it's a good quote.
And
however,
so this movie was really, it had to be abandoned because it had to go out and face the critics and the audience and the bad press and the bad publicity and bad box office performance and everything else.
Before we go down before we fall into that punji trap, Akiva, I thought if I remember right, Malpasso's editorial, Clint Eastwood had almost the entire first floor of Building 81, definitely to the left if you walked in. Yeah. And I think Akiva was right to the right. He was one of the few offices on the first floor, and I was upstairs with John Milius.
He might have been. I don't know.
But he was always very friendly, very open, talk about anything. So I have a good impression of Akiva, though I never worked with him. But I have a good impression.
I never had a bad experience with Akiva. I have heard stories. Everybody hears stories, but and Akiva changed. He became a little more mellow and a little less intense, and he even lost a ton of weight. Sadly, his wife passed away, and that changed him physically and in every way. I mean, it just the physical change is really noticeable.
Nobody wants that. I mean, look, if one of these guys ever surfaces as an enemy, and I know Bill Daly doesn't have any in like the true samurai sense. You want to settle it with the individual themselves. You don't want a bunch of family havoc. So that's a bummer to hear. But like I said, for me, from my very limited engagement, he was always pretty easy to work with, and he was working on shit all the time. It was like Star Trek. I think there was even a Star Trek script in his office.
Could be.
Like, I mean, there was a ton of stuff. But so he's the producer, and this movie gets the green light, and Josh Brolin. So
what happened was Josh Brolin came on, and I don't know all the circumstances, and I don't know that mentioning Josh Brolin is even relevant, but I know that Josh Brolin got assigned to it. And at some point Akiva, but I don't know which came first, but Neville Dean and Taylor were gone. And I don't know if that was a Josh Brolin thing, if they didn't want to work with him or what. I mean, I don't know. I just
what'd you hear? Did you hear anything on it?
No, I just heard that they're gone, but I didn't.
Yeah, that could
I
be
was
anything.
busy. I was busy doing Harry Potter, um, and the Deathly Hallows, and then that was getting split into two parts and everything. So I was busy. I didn't really want to do this movie. It was assigned to someone else because I was busy with Harry Potter
I love
and
how
busy
Bill Daly's like,
just
I don't have
running
time for
the.
your shit. I was
No,
on
no, no,
Harry
no. It's
Potter.
not that. It's not that. I had four executives working with me, and well, three. I had three. There were four different people who held those roles, but um, I a lot of time frequently I never had to say, "Oh, I need you to do this movie," and I would never say because I don't want to do it. It would be, "I need you to do this movie," um, because usually it's because they were the best suited for it, you know.
Mhm.
Um, Barbara had a great way with people and stuff, and she was like Barbara would do the Tim Burton things because she just loved the editor and everything, and she had a way with him. But
And
Elizabeth
people
had a
loved
way.
Barbara. People loved Barbara, if I remember right.
Yes, yes, and Elizabeth had the same thing. She had a way, and there were certain, and her personality was better suited for other people and stuff. Not that she couldn't do, she could have done any of them. I jealously held on to Harry Potter just because
All right.
I attached myself to it early on because Richard Harris was doing it, and I go back to my teenage years with Richard Harris. So, but
Well, we're gonna
generally these were assigned out, and then that was assigned to someone else, and then I had to get involved at the very end because because that person got busy. The first part of Harry Potter got delivered. Um, this was really a problem once it got to the mix stage, mixing and scoring. It really was, and I was there every night
hold
babysitting.
up. Hold up. I want to know, and it makes perfect sense to me that is when the Titanic starts to sink, that all the emergency techs are brought in to try to resuscitate it. But I want to know what you're doing at night. Like, what is your, well, let's take a break. We're going to
Okay.
circle back. We've got lots to discuss here. Jonah Hex, currently being rebooted by James Cameron. I'm kidding. Nobody's going to fucking touch this for a while. But uh, we'll circle back with more on Jonah Hex and the production stories that were. I want to know I want to know if Bill Daly and I are thinking about the same directors we would assign pawn off to other people. I want to know what Bill Daly's doing on the midnight shift, trying to save Jonah Hex, and we'll get some more stories together for you production wise. All right, everyone, Combat Radio coming back soon. I guess I'll apologize now.
Is this okay? Hi, my name is David Pasquesi. You may recognize me from television program or motion picture, or not. NMOSD is a central nervous system disorder, and it's pretty brutal. You can help. Go to GuthieJacksonFoundation.org and donate today to help them find a cure. GuthieJacksonFoundation.org.